Well, welcome everybody. My name is Holly Wittenberg, and this is our monthly DEI Leader Network event. We are thrilled to have Queenie Plater joining us, and she and I are going to have a discussion about the talent management process and how a thoughtful, intentional, and strategic talent management process can really improve your organization. And that there's really no time better, obviously, than at the beginning of the year to take stock and plan out how you want to execute that strategy. Sorry, having some, there we go. So I love this quote from Thomas Watson. He was the CEO of IBM. And he said, he had a different take on mistakes, right? He said, I was asked if I was going to fire an employee who made a mistake that cost the company $600,000. And I said, no, I just spent $600,000 on training him, right? And I love that. I love the idea that we should invest in our people, that we should acknowledge that experience is a trait and make it safe to fail. So why do we even talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Well, we know it's the right thing to do. There's no shortage of research that shows that diverse, equitable, and inclusive organizations are more productive, that they have higher margins, and that they serve their customers or their stakeholders better. It's the smart thing to do, and it's more timely than ever. We've seen, especially over the last couple of years, first the Me Too movement, and then following George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement, how important diversity, equity, and inclusion is to progressive leaders. And we would argue it should be important to everybody because it makes good business sense as well. So the DEI Leader Network, you are a member now that you've attended an event. We host a monthly event. We publish education and insights on our website, and we've grown the community organically to over 500 people. We're actually really excited to say that we're also launched our private LinkedIn group, which you can join, and where we want to continue the discussion. We have found that people are eager to stay connected, to tap into this community. And so this will be, again, in the spirit of that grassroots, allow you all to talk to each other directly and not have to wait for these events to engage. And we will send a link out to this group as follow-up to this event so that you know how to join. So how is Diversity Works a little bit different? Well, today the topic is about the talent management strategy, which really sits in this middle domain, the internal domain, which is incredibly important. Obviously, how we operate our organization day in and day out is critically important. But we would argue that if you want sustainable change and a hardwiring of that into your organization, that you need to also incorporate the strategic domain and the external domain. So the strategy includes having vision and values, making the business case for DEI, having a plan for implementation and communication, holding leaders accountable. And on the external side, this is really about the external perception of your organization or your business. You know, how are you building your teams? What do your customers think of you? Are you able to capture all the opportunity available to you in a market because you've put the right teams together to serve them and to design new features, services, products? What is your external brand from a marketing and PR standpoint? Are you leveraging your balance sheet to really drive change through your partnerships or suppliers? We had a renewable energy client who said, well, we don't really, we're a financing company. We don't have a lot of suppliers. And we pointed out to them that they spend millions of dollars a year on law firms. And so what they decided to do was make a requirement that the teams assigned to their account were more diverse. And community, philanthropy, and sustainability, that's really about how you engage in the community and how you support people who are also trying to do this good work. And last but not least, understanding the regulatory and policy environment. So with all of this, we feel like by addressing all of these elements, which we do through our comprehensive survey, we can help you really focus on the things where you can have the greatest impact and ensure that your efforts earn the ROI that they deserve. So I'm going to stop for a second. Like I said, I'm Holly Wittenberg. I'm a managing partner at Diversity Works. We're a woman-owned consulting firm, and we provide strategic advice to for-profit, non-for-profit, and governmental groups to ensure that they are successful as possible in achieving their DEI goals and creating a methodology that ensures that the change is hardwired into the organization. And now I'm going to introduce you to our lovely subject matter expert and our friend, Queenie Plater. She's also in our advisory committee. She's been a leader in HR for many decades at Johns Hopkins Hospital System, and now I'll give her an opportunity to introduce herself.
Thank you, Holly. Can everyone hear me well? I just want to make sure. Okay, good. It's been my honor to have been selected to be an advisory partner with Diversity Works. It's been great learning from them and them learning from me, and it's a good partnership. So I just want to thank them. It's a wonderful team. Just a little bit more about me. After those many decades, I decided that I was tired of making money for someone else and decided that it was time for me to start making money on my own. So I started a consulting business in 2021. I ended my career at Johns Hopkins in mid-July of 2020. I took off for a little bit to just take some time to give space to think about what I really wanted. Prior to that, I had thought about that I wanted to end my career as a consultant, and so set up all sorts of things to get to the place where I could start the business. So I held focus groups, I talked to attorneys, I researched how to be a consultant, I sat in on various meetings, saved some money, and then set up a website, etc. So I started my business in Black History Month, February of 2021, and I have not looked back since. It's been quite rewarding, and I was telling my sister just the other day, I think I know I made the best decision for me, and I wouldn't want to go back. Now, should I have to go back and take a job, depending on the environment we're sitting in right now? I'm more than happy to do that. But I kind of like being my own boss. And I'm going to put a little plug in for HR, because I'm not sure what industries and or what disciplines you all are in, but my passion is HR. I've been here forever. Undergrad is in HR, graduate, all my certifications. This is the time for human resources. All of the studies are showing that we're in the top 10 of professions that are highly regarded. We are in a good position right now. I get at least up to 5 calls a day asking me for referrals for good HR leaders. And a couple of reasons why I think that's important. I think COVID changed some of that, right? Because we're teleworking now. COVID's done that. Now we're seen as valued. We are a valued strategic partner. We're sitting at the table. We have our pulse on what's going on in the organization. We know the culture. We know the people. But I will say that good practitioners out here, good HR practitioners, are not leaving the job unless organizations are taking care of them. So if you're not in a position where you are in HR, make sure that you're taking care of your HR practitioners as well, making sure that they have the necessary equipment, supplies, resources they need to be successful. And then they will continue to stay and produce for you as well.
Queenie, your paper just covered you a little bit, just so you know.
Okay, what about now?
No, you're good.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
As I was saying, it's very important to be seen as a strategic partner. When I started out in HR, I'd probably tell you how old I am. We were called personnel, and we were transactional. In teaching, taught at Georgetown, and now I teach at Johns Hopkins, the Bloomberg School. The first thing I always ask them is, what do you know about human resources? Oh, we go and we fill out our payroll forms. We fill out our benefits. We give you our emergency information. Those are the things that they know. That's all I know. That's all I know, Miss Plater. I said, okay. Well, at the end of the semester, I'm going to ask you the same questions. And if you tell me those things, then you've not learned a darn thing I've told you. And that you probably aren't going to get an A. So I then go back and ask the
What's
same question.
interesting is when you said things were, it was called personnel, you know, we just had this conversation just about 30 minutes ago, and we
Oh,
were talking to one of our staffing agencies around, you know, there wasn't a thing called HR, it was called personnel, and it was called industrial relations.
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And you know what? Some people still call us personnel. And in talking, I said, yeah, well,
There are
human
worse names.
resources, huh? Yeah,
There are
they're
worse
worse names.
names.
Yeah, I'm sure they call us something else outside of us too, right?
Yeah,
It doesn't. I don't really care. Just listen to what I have to say. Take it
that's
in,
right. That's right.
right? But at the end of the course, I asked them the same question. So what did you learn? What do you think we do? And they shake their heads and they're like, I don't think I can work in HR. Y'all do too much. And,
That's
and
right.
I've never thought about all the things that go into a successful HR environment. So the last thing I'll say about that before we start talking about talent management is that I've recently seen a trend in that human resources is no longer reporting to the CEO and they're reporting to the CFO, which I highly take offense to, because that person's not going to be very, in my opinion, right? In my 30 years of experience, they're going to tighten those purse strings and they're not understanding what we're doing and to try and develop employees, right? So if that happens, if there's any way that you can convince others that you should be having a seat at the table and work directly with the CEO, it's most important. And you're seen then as more of a strategic partner. Some organizations, like a friend who may or may not be joining, their organization just changed and he's reporting to the COO. That might be a little better because they know a little bit more about operations. But in my humble opinion, I still think that reporting to the CEO gives you a better avenue, gives you more clout, makes human resources more important and more strategic in the work that it's doing.
That's right. And I think that it's important for HR professionals to be strategic, to have that seat at the table. It goes both ways, and that's one of the reasons for today's presentation is we really want you to step back, think about your plan, think about all the different elements that go into talent management, so that you can execute against that plan, because there is still so much transactional work in HR. You
There
can be
is.
bogged down with the day-to-day and not take the time to step up. So we have a series of polls throughout this event because Queenie and I wanted to make it fun and interactive. So we're going to go to the first poll. We'd like you all to answer it. And I'm just going to put it up right now. All right, let me know if you can see it. Can you see it, Queenie?
I can.
Okay, great. Give everybody a few minutes to answer it.
Okay.
So we want to know if you regard your HR function as transactional or strategic. And obviously there are three options: transactional only, strategic and transactional, or you don't know, you're unsure. Great, I think we've got a few more people on there. We'll give people 2 more seconds. A few more folks. All right, that's enough. Thank you.
Okay.
So strategic and transactional is the clear winner.
Okay.
We do have 20% saying unsure, which
Oh,
we would advise you to get to know your HR department a little better then. And see if, I would assume that you probably know they're transactional, but you're unsure if they're also strategic. Any
yeah.
thoughts about those results, Queenie?
No, as you said earlier, there are still transactional things that we must do, right? And in those transactional things, we must fill out certain regulatory reports, right? And we must report to the labor board on some things. So there is a bit of transactional things that we will never get away with. And I don't mind doing those things because I know that they're done. I'm kind of a type A too. But as she said, it's a little of both. So if you don't know, I do agree with Holly wholeheartedly to get to know your HR department if you are not that person and figure out what they're doing. Okay. All right, so let's dive into, if we can, the talent management process. And can we close the poll?
Oh, we didn't. I did close the poll. It's still
Okay.
showing.
It is. Maybe I'll close it. Okay, it works from my end too. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 4 stages of the talent management framework. We're going to talk about assessing, acquiring, developing, and aligning. Now, the word acquiring sometimes doesn't set well with some people. How do you all feel about the word acquiring talent when I say that? Do you all have any opposition to that word?
Feel free to put comments in the chat if you don't want to come off mute or just join the discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's okay. I mean, it's acquiring and, you're not purchasing anybody, but you are
Correct.
acquiring talent.
Correct. Yes. Okay. So let's begin. Let's begin with looking at assessment and what we do and how I break it down. So I'll come into an organization and I'll first look at an assessment for you. So I will meet with whomever you designate to take on this project. It's a lot of work. Anthony Kinslow said, no issue with acquiring. And I know Anthony, so very good, Anthony. Bravo. So we'll break it down with assessment. So I begin looking at the organization's strategic plan. Do you all know that if your organization has a strategic plan? Yes. Okay, I get some nods that yes. So that's great. So I will ask to see the strategic plan, and then I'll come back to human resources and look at your strategic workforce plan. And your workforce plan must mirror the strategic plan of the organization. What do I mean by that? An example could be that your organization is going to grow, right? So within the next 3 to 5 years, it's been determined that you're going to add services, you're going to add people with the services, and you're going to set timelines on it. So HR will then come back, look at that strategic organizational plan, and decide how they're going to meet the needs of that organization plan, right? So if they need to add 500 employees and we need to get those 500 employees onboarded and ready to start working by 2024 July, they should have a plan in place as to how they're going to meet that. They should know which disciplines they're going to hire, how much they've done a comp review, what they're going to pay them, and then how they're going to begin the recruitment and take it from there. The strategic work. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say on the workforce planning, we hear a lot about layoffs right now. Can you talk about workforce planning when you're talking about reductions in force?
Yeah, so that is part of your what I was going to say is that workforce plan is a live, breathing, living document, and it can change at any time. And so as HR practitioners, we have to be agile and we have to be able to move with whatever changes are in place. So in terms of layoff. Instead of hiring, they've decided that within the next 2 years, and sometimes you don't even get 2 years, you might get 3 months, 4 months, etc., right? You've got to lay off people. And then you've got to, as an HR practitioner, you've got to go and pull up your policy on layoffs so that you know then how to execute it carefully. And we'll talk a little bit later about policies and procedures. And then you've got to make sure that you're adhering to the Warren Act. The Warren Act says that you have to give 45 days notice. So your strategic plan could include not only hires, but include layoffs as well. It could include upgrading or uploading or upsourcing. They're calling it all different things now with your employees. So instead of having one person do, and I'm going to use the healthcare model, instead of you having a unit secretary, you may have a secretarial associate that can do 2 or 3 different things. And so we as an HR have to know with our strategic work plan, when is that change going to take place? Have we written a job description? What does that new talent person look like? And then how are we going to train them to be able to be successful? There are a couple more chats in there, Holly. Are they speaking to the workforce plan?
No.
Okay, good.
Just some hellos and agreements.
Okay. We also look at, in that stage, we're also going to look at metrics, right? Hopefully you have metrics in place. I created dashboards in my assessment planning and looked at whatever metrics I wanted to look at for the C-suite, for the leadership department. And some of the metrics that I look at are turnover by the organization. I look over turnover by department, turnover by discipline, reasons why people are leaving, and I use exit data to support that. I look at time to fill, successful probationary completions, how many were successful, how many were not. And I look at terminations and whether they're voluntary and involuntary. I'll then look at how you're sourcing your candidates, and then look at how you're recruiting and selecting those candidates. All of that should be documented in your workforce live document, and it will be taken from some policy and procedures and SOPs that we'll talk about later. And also, I will look at your handbooks, review your policies and your procedures, and your standard operating procedures as well. So standard operating procedures are different from HR policies and procedures. They are SOPs on how you're going to accomplish these specific tasks in HR.
And Queenie, talk a little bit about the difference between voluntary and involuntary, and especially, you know, in the environment that we're operating in a talent, people competing for the best talent in the marketplace.
Yeah. So involuntary, it's a nicer way of saying terminated. I've terminated Holly because because Holly was fighting the other day. She picked a fight with her colleague.
I am nothing but trouble.
She smacked him across the table. We have witnesses to validate it. You know, if I typically, for fighting, I put both individuals out on unpaid leave, administrative leave while I'm investigating it. And then, oh, Holly, we can't have that, Christine says. But that's the involuntary, when they do something that's against your HR progressive discipline setup. And hopefully you all have a progressive discipline in place.
So,
voluntary, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'm just going to finish what you're saying.
Yeah. So voluntary would be, Queenie Plater, have been here for 3 years. I've shared with my director the things that I need to be successful, the things that I need to grow in my position, and I'm not being heard. And therefore, Diversity Works, I saw an ad for a position with Diversity Works, and I went and interviewed with them. And they seem to be able to meet my needs. and I'm going to go and work for them. Now, what I do, I go back to my manager and I say to my manager, not everybody does this, but I do. And I said, Denise, I've been talking to you for the last 3 years about what needs I have, and you've not been able to meet those needs. I've found another organization that can, and so I am giving you the requisite notice period, and then I'm leaving. Well, Denise might say, no, 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 can you give me another week or so to see what I can come up with? And so in the back of my mind, I've got to decide if I'm going to trust Denise as to whether or not she's going to really come forward and come through, because I've been telling her this for 3 years, or whether or not I'm going to move to another organization where they've already laid out a plan for me of what they can do for me. So that's more of the voluntary.
Yeah.
And in this economy, after COVID, it would be my biggest takeaway for you in HR that you try and meet their needs. And we'll talk about that, I think, during the phase 3 of how you develop them and train them. Because it costs, just like the first, not the poll, but the quote that Holly gave you, it costs a lot to train your staff. It costs a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of resources. So why would you then let someone go if you can't, if you can prohibit it, keep them where they are?
We got an email asking a question before the session related to metrics that I'd like to bring up now. The question was, what 2 diversity metrics would you look at for a small organization that wants to do better? And you and I talked about that voluntary turnover and adding the dimension of gender and race to that tracking.
Yeah.
And then was there another one that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, so what we can, again, it's a smaller organization, the young lady said, so they may not have a lot of opportunities for looking at talent metrics and including diversity and inclusion. However, what we can look at are career advancement opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. So if Dawn decided she wanted to look at being the chief human resource operator, and she's been preparing for that role, and she's come to the table and interviewed for it, then that's a perfect opportunity for her to move into that role. And then that leaves Dawn's position open for that individual to perhaps the organization to look at filling it with perhaps a diverse candidate or just a candidate, period. And one more metric would be looking at your engagement scores, right? Some organizations send out engagement surveys annually. Some do it every 2 to 3 years. Depends on your organization and what you can afford. Sending out an engagement survey and not acting on it is probably the worst thing in the world you could do. It's one of those check the box. Okay, we checked the box, we sent it out, but we didn't do anything with it. That just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So my plea to you is, if you do send out engagement surveys, make sure that you act on the survey that you do. And you don't have to buy these expensive surveys. When I was with a smaller organization, I had an intern working for me, and we created the questions in-house. The C-suite got together, did it in-house. And we did it, what is that tool we use?
SurveyMonkey?
SurveyMonkey.
Yeah.
We did it SurveyMonkey.
Yeah.
And the questions went,
I was just going to say, and if you capture demographic data in the survey, then you're able to analyze it and look to see if there are differences between different groups in terms of their engagement level. And then to Queenie's point, you create a plan, and part of that will be a communication plan back to the people that took the survey about what you plan to do to address it.
Absolutely. And communication back to them is utmost important. I think I saw a question from Anthony. He said, what did he say?
He said salary based upon race and gender at various levels, underprivileged if necessary.
Yeah, he's absolutely right. Next time we'll ask Tony to present the to the
Yeah. Great. Well, let's
and
move on
Steph,
to our next poll, Queenie.
yeah, let's do it. And Stephanie, it's good to see you on here. I see she joined our group.
Hi.
Hi. Stephanie used to work with me many, many years ago, and I helped her move on. And now she's a director. I'm so happy to see that. Okay, what's our next poll question?
The next one, for some reason, is deciding not to launch. So let's see if we can do that. Oh, there we go. Okay. Forgive me. Okay. Ooh, cancel. Apologies. All right, now let's try again. Oh, there we go. Launch. Thank you. All right. Hopefully you can see it. Does your organization provide orientation for new employees? Overwhelming. Clear winner. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, someone in the comment section said they believed it was more transactional. They're moving to onboarding. So I'll speak to that in a little bit because I see them as as different. And that's just my opinion, of course, and I'll share with you why. So we're moving into stage 2, which is acquire. If we'll get up to the next slide where we'll talk about stage 2 of the talent management
Yeah.
circle. Yeah.
Oh, we have one more poll.
Oh, we do. Okay. How often does your organization review and update policies and procedures and look at the employee handbook? This is very, very important.
This is Queenie loves HR policies more than is probably anybody else I've ever met.
I do. It keeps me out of trouble.
I love it. I love it. She's like, no, send them all. Oh, I'll just send you a couple. No, send them all.
Send them all.
So here we'll have a little more variety in our responses. We'll give people just another second or two to answer.
Okay, good.
All right, that's probably enough, 30 seconds. So number 1 is annually. Number 2 is every few years. Then sort of they haven't updated since I've joined and don't know, or sort of tied. And one person says they don't have handbook or policies. Well, you need to call Queenie Plater then. We'll help the organization get that put in place.
Yeah.
So talk about why annually is so important.
Yeah, so I say annually or every 1 to 2 years. And the reason is, I didn't see what someone said. The reason is because so often our regulations change, right? And we embed in the policies and procedures some regulations. So you don't want to have a policy and procedure out there for your employees that's incorrect.
That's right.
Annually is a good, and you don't have to update them. You just have to make sure you read through them and maybe sign off that you've reviewed them and put the year that you've reviewed them. The previous place that I worked, we did it every 2 years, unless there was a regulatory update that changed things. Policies are like, and I'm not, no disrespect, but policies to me are like my Bible. I would carry, when I first started in HR, we had those big manuals, right? Everybody had a manual. I carried it home every night. What a nerd I am. And I would read them to make sure that I knew what I was talking about if I spoke to an employee. And then, of course, we automated them. But in stage 2, acquiring, in this entire focus, it focuses on engagement of your employees. So when I come in, I'll review your interview questions that you ask of staff. I personally recommend behavioral interviews. When you're interviewing, you ask the same set of questions to each applicant that you're interviewing. Behavioral interviews, an example is, tell me about a time when you encountered conflict and how you resolved it. and you ask each director of security that same question. Each discipline, you create new questions for this. So I'll look at your SOPs to make sure to see if these are written, your behavioral interview questions. I'll see if you have things in place so that you're asking the same question of each person. I'll ensure that diversity, recruitment, advancement promotions are embedded within those interview questions. And I'll ensure that when you get to hiring that candidate, that you and the hiring manager are on board, right? That you have come together. You may have metrics, you may have a sheet that you use to score the person. How did you score them? Why did you score them a 1 and I scored them a 5 out of 5 as the top? And then you talk about how you came to identify the top candidates. Going back to the person that then said, yes, I do separate them into onboarding versus orientation. Orientation introduces that person to the organization. And yes, they said it's like 1 day if possible. Some organizations based on finances have cut it down to half a day. Some have cut it down to even doing it online. So anytime they're working for you, make sure they're paid for this orientation. Yeah. But it gives them the opportunity to know, how often I'm paid. What do I do if I'm injured on the job? Who do I contact? What is the culture of the organization? How often, will I be required to take certain classes that are required? I think that's different from onboarding. For me, onboarding takes 3 to 6 months. People have often asked me, why did you say 3 to 6 months? It depends on the organization, depends on the culture, right? Often people will use 3 months because it coincides with the probationary period. That's the time when you decide, and it should be in your acquiring section, whether or not this person's going to be successful in the organization. And as you've onboarded them, have they completed their assignments that you've given them? So I've created tools for organizations to use to onboard them. And while you're onboarding them, then you should select a mentor. Don't wait until the end of the onboarding time to say, oh, and at the end of this, Queenie, you're going to now be mentored by Holly. And I'll introduce you in a few weeks. Well, Holly should be introduced to you at the end or towards the end of your onboarding session. And then that mentor will then help guide you. And that mentor may be there for a year. It depends again on the organization and how long they budgeted, because Holly's being taken away from her job for a period of time so that she can onboard you. So that she can mentor you at the same time that she's got to fulfill her duties as well. Rosemary said hiring managers can select a buddy. Absolutely. That's buddy, a manager can be that mentor as well. I have served as a mentor for so many people, and I love mentoring people. I love hiring new, inexperienced people. I acquire them. I have a story that I'll tell you. I won't tell so many stories because I know that we only have a few necessary. I have lots of stories. I'm going to write a book at the end of my journey. But I had a friend whose child had finished college and didn't really know what he wanted to do. And so I said, come bring him to me and I'll talk to him. And he had an English degree and didn't really know what he wanted to do. He just wanted to get out of college. And so I had an entry-level position. And I said, I'm going to mentor you. I'm going to bring you on board. And I'm going to mentor you, guide you. And then after about 3 or 4 years in the role, he decided he was going to quit. Now, he's a millennial, and that's about the time that we do we do see them disappear. But he wanted to quit because he wanted to go hiking for 3 months. And I'm like, okay, that really won't work for me. What we did was had a group meeting. We talked about why he wanted to leave, and the staff overwhelmingly said, no, we're going to take your projects. We're going to take your roles and responsibilities for 3 months. And we FaceTimed him weekly. He came back, and that was 10 years ago, and he's still at the organization. So onboarding, finding a great mentor, helping someone identify what is working for them is part of the acquiring process. So let's move on. Somebody said, that's awesome. I think so too. So our next poll question is, does your organization offer training and development opportunities? And that is stage 3 of our assessment in developing. So do they?
Yes, for some reason, again, let's skip this poll because it's not working, and we'll just move on to the next slide, Queenie.
Okay, no problem. So yes, do you offer that coaching and career development and assess their performance? Do you have a tool that you can assess the performance of your employees? And then do you identify gaps in their learnings? And then if you do you support their knowledge and skill development? Mm-hmm. And all of this should map to the organization's competencies. And if you don't have competencies, you may want to think about setting up and meeting with your C-suite to set up competencies so that you can then go back and map them to their performance. Some of the most commonly used performance competencies have been effective communication. Are you able to effectively communicate? That works through all levels within the organization. Do you develop and support talent development? That's maybe in the more leadership ways. If you're successful at having processed and place your employees in a way that they're developing, then they will want to stay with you, right? And we have a great quote that I'm going to read to you next, if we can get to that slide. And it is by Richard Branson. And he said, train people well enough so that they leave, but treat them well enough so that they don't want to leave. And Roger, the gentleman I was talking about, again, he's still at the organization. He was taught well enough and treated well enough so that he's not leaving. And I said that it's been over 10 years, and he's a millennial, so who knew? The last part of me coming in and assessing your organization, it goes back, it's a circle, right? It's the talent management is just a circle, and it goes back to the beginning. What are the business needs of the organization? Are we matching those needs? Is there a link between those needs and individual needs of the individual? And that's where we look at pay equity, total rewards, succession planning, and all of this equals retention. And I think there might be one last poll question.
Yeah, let's see if I can get this one to work.
Okay.
No.
But maybe we'll get it in the comments section.
Yeah, why don't we do that? One. So, really, it's if you need support, this working group, this leader network is here. Like I said, we're going to launch our LinkedIn page, and we want you to get to know each other and to build this community with us. It's about 1,500 strong right now. We'd love to see a good percentage of you all on that LinkedIn group sharing your best practices, your ideas, and we will do what we can as Diversity Works to support that community and provide you with insight and direct you to resources. I do want to thank Queenie for presenting again today. One of the things that we really want to impart upon you, which echoes what we talked about last month, which is that we believe process is really important. When you're thinking about equity and inclusion and the rules of the road, having a process ensures that, or at least limits the risk that people are treated differently. Being transparent about what the process is, but what criteria are, how people get hired, how people get promoted, how they get paid, how the organization is measuring its own performance and how that cascades down through the organization is really critical if you want to achieve an equitable and inclusive organization. Now, you may notice that I've not said diversity, and that's because that's one of your goals, right? And diversity takes many forms, but we feel like having strong processes and good transparency is really the key to it. And that's what Queenie does, and that's what I do as well.
Transparency is key. Yeah. So any questions?
Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'm clearly not the best presenter on this, folks. Any questions for Queenie, please put them in the chat. And then also please note that we're going to honor Black History Month with a discussion about the Black experience in the workplace. We had our first session last February, and we're going to follow up with a slightly different take this session, and we'll send you an email about it. But please put your questions for Queenie in the chat. Christina, maybe she has a question. Or Andrew.
Hi, Harley and Queenie. I'm very interested in this topic. I work in program design and management, but I've learned really fast that working well with HR serves really well because every program kind of needs a similar structure to the organization, right? Like we need participant agreements and clear protocols. But something that I am thinking about is also like, how do you start fresh? Like when you're working in an organization that's been here for like 10 to 15 years and they don't have procedures and protocols, like even as a staff, like what is even a appropriate way to ask about that, right? Without it seeming like, you know, I'm telling people how to do their job, because we don't even have an HR also in our organization. We have operations. So,
I'm kidding.
Yeah, so we have operations, and then we have like an external HR company, but we only have an in-house operations, but they don't do the same thing. But it is kind of hard to navigate between the two. So I guess my question in that is like, how do you have a conversation even about like, well, what do you expect of me? And how what's my point of reference as I continue to do my own work?
Right. Yeah, good questions. So can I just ask one question? How does your external HR consultants help you?
So they do our timesheets, and they have workshops, like you talked about professional development. So we're able to select and attend any of their workshops that they have for us. If there's culture issues, we do have a culture consultant that we can say, hey, like this is something that I'm noticing. And they'll do like their own investigation and questioning and then propose suggestions. So from my experience, that's how I see they've been helping us so far.
Yeah. So I would go to, and again, I don't know the structure, the levels in your organization. I would go to maybe your boss and say, you know, I attended a session and it was suggested that we should have some policies and procedures and handbooks in place so that we know systematically how to proceed with different things, so that we know what is required of new employees and for procedures so that we are consistent in handling matters the same way for the same things. That's how I would address it. Others on the call may have other ideas about how they would suggest it. I would not be dogmatic, right? I wouldn't say, hey, you know, I just learned that we're behind the scenes and we don't have this, this, and this, but approach it in that way and say, you know, in some of the literature I'm reading, everybody's talking about the best practice is for us to have a handbook as our guide and as our resource. And it's so important for new employees as we onboard them to know what's expected of them.
Right, right. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Christina, they're probably working with an online human resources application. And many of them now have boilerplate policies and procedures. And, I would encourage anybody that's interested in this and wants to advance equity and inclusion and standard rules of the road, as I call it, offer to be part of a working group. Say, let's take these boilerplate templates, let's look at them together, and, be part of the solution as well. That's not to say you have to do that, but if you're interested in it, it's a great development opportunity, because even every manager in every company is part of HR, right?
Yeah.
They may not be in the department, but we're all responsible for HR. Performance and talent management is everybody in an organization's responsibility. An individual's responsibility to manage their own career, and then a manager's responsibility to manage the team and align with the business objectives. So we'll help you any way we can, Christina. So feel free to reach out to us afterwards too.
I will. Thank you.
I think we have a few, no, just some thanks for attending. Great. Any other questions? Put them in the chat or come off mute. No? Well, Queenie, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Queenie, let me just put this back up so you can see how to reach her. Whoop. At Queenie Plater at QCP, which are her initials, consulting.com. And then you can also contact me and I'll put you in touch with her. We can help you as well. And we just love Queenie to death. We think she is top HR personnel that we know. Running 3 Johns Hopkins hospitals HR function is no small feat. I
No,
always tell people running a hospital is like running a small city, because you've got everything. You've got transportation, security. It's like having a police force, having public transportation. You've got so many different professions. You've got a cafeteria, you're doing food management. So there's rarely a topic that a hospital executive hasn't had to tackle if they've been involved in managing a hospital. So Queenie's a great resource for us and for all of you now.
thank you, Holly. There were 2 more chats and then I guess that's it. Oh, thank yous. Okay. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank
And
you.
don't hesitate to reach out and look for our LinkedIn group link, and we'll continue the discussion online.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
All right.